So me and Chris talked just for a minute before we started recording. And the one we mentioned first off was Jerica Taylor's Wisteria Witness. So Anna, that was one of your selections. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving us your take on it. Why did you pick that one? What spoke to you about it? And then we'll kind of go around and add our thoughts after you have a little bit to say first.
Sure. Well, I guess first off, the thing that struck me the most was kind of like a pet interest of mine, which is just this tension between what you can express and what you can't express, what you leave absent by mentioning it, what is present by not mentioning it. And I think that this piece really did an amazing job at kind of pulling both sides of that tension between characters that were kind of like half present, you know, they were mentioned, but they were never explored. And then this creature that's not a character, but it's still the center of the piece, that gets a couple of half descriptions, like they're very evocative. The what's the line? The shiny leaf type skin that doesn't really exist, but that's the way that it exists. I found that whole kind of line super interesting and intriguing for kind of making me want to read more. And then having kind of the story of the actual plot, the actual events being woven through that just kind of drew me into the world of the piece. So that's one reason why I love that piece.
Yeah, that line, I got it here, I believe. Disguised, the glossy shine of its skin appears as leaves caressed by moonlight. Arms like branches go out and up. Maybe it came every night, hidden under what I cleared away. So yeah, I'll mention these pieces will be linked on our podcast page, so you'll be able to get to them easily. But yeah, nice. I like that description of what's mentioned and what's called, what's called out by not being mentioned.
Did anybody have a kind of a pretty obvious feeling associated with clearly something's being spotlighted, but we're also not getting to see the thing that has the flashlight beam shined on it? Did that evoke a specific feeling for anybody? Because I got a little dread. I got a little bit of an Edgar Allan Poe feeling of the thing that's lurking and kind of reaching, and it's very graspy and viney, and wasn't sure where to go from there.
And it made me want to kind of turn around and watch my back.
Right.
Yeah, I thought, these are my thoughts. I really liked it too. I think it was my favorite piece of literature in the whole issue. And I do think that from just the first introduction lines, it really grabbed me and it wanted me to continue reading it. And I thought the writing was very well. And also the transitioning within the writing was very well too. So I liked these words or these sentences, and I'll tell you my take of how I felt, about this piece of work. So I like the word when she said, when she described the wisteria tree, that it's ambitiously going for the roof. And then the fact that she got tangled themselves around my wrists. Okay, so that was very interesting for me. Arms like branches go out and about, which I think interesting use of personification, that the wisteria tree becomes almost a person grabbing her or tangling or trying to tell her something. Hey, come on, get out of here or something like that. And then I like the fact that she said, I study it in several breaths. I thought that was very interesting. And then it's kind of there's a bit of a sadness and melancholy to the whole piece, which grabbed me also. The fact that she said that she's monotone of washing dishes and folding laundry. So that was kind of an interesting take there. Again, the wisteria tree really is obviously the star here. The wisteria begins to bloom more widely, and she kind of repeats the word widely throughout. And then she goes back to her life suffocating. And then when she says she kind of like fled in the middle of the night, took a small suitcase. pulled behind me. So here I would think that it seems to me that the wild wisteria tree, kind of like inspired her to run away from her monotone life. Okay. And I think overall, I like her description of the wisteria tree's freedom and the wild nature of the tree. But also I thought you were talking about Edgar Allan Poe. There's definitely that morbid or kind of somber the tone throughout the story. I personally thought that it's very similar to Virginia Woolf's writing. Mm. So where it's, Virginia Woolf talks about the confined women who want to break free, right? And the women who, in her story, she calls upon these women for the pursuit of liberty, right? So that's something that I thought is kind of like, I don't know, maybe she's probably very much influenced by Virginia Woolf. And it reminded me of a story that I read a long time ago, and I'm not sure if I'm recalling it correctly, but it's about a woman who lived very much of a timid woman, huh? So she lived in a very confined, timid kind of lifestyle, like with her shadow. But her shadow was like almost wild. I kind of didn't like her character. Shadow didn't like the character of the woman. So the shadow eventually eats up the woman. And in a way, it's kind of
thinking of the yellow wallpaper?
I don't know exactly the name of it. I can't remember the name, but I may be using too much my imagination because it's such a long time. Like the shadow ate up the woman. Like, you really need to get out of your skin, almost, women. And I think that's kind of like, I feel, the message behind this piece, where it's really kind of, you have to become a little bit stronger. You have to kind of get out of your skin to have a life. I know this sounds really bad to say, but anyway, that's how I feel about this piece. That this wisteria tree that is full of beauty and just growing and blossoming, kind of telling this timid woman, maybe you should do more than washing dishes, pruning, landscaping, making sure everything looks manicured and pedicured and beautiful. Maybe you should do more wild things. Maybe you should just go out, go on a trip. And I think that's kind of like, maybe nature's trying to tell us something here. That's that kind of thing. And I do think that in nature, if we look very carefully, we will find a lot of wonderful solutions, maybe in our life that we perhaps imprison ourselves within, So I do think that, so one can really find a lot of analogy within this piece, a lot of similarities, but perhaps to older literature. But I think that the message here is pretty clear, kind of like the idea of break out.
I think there's also, go ahead.
So that's what I felt.
I didn't know if Anna or maybe Chris, you had to take on the ending or the last couple of sentences, because that's what drew me in. When you get kind of, for me, that kind of gave me the best insight, maybe. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it gave me an insight into the speaker. And the last sentence is, "This time, I am the one who wishes to be unseen, my flight unacknowledged. It does me the same kindness of pretending we never passed in the night." So that was kind of just a curious thing. It kind of drew me into that character, the speaker, kind of wanting to withdraw.
Yeah.
And is that a positive, I guess,
right.
desire, or is that a negative? I guess we could take on that. But so Anna, did you have a take
yes
on that?
So I didn't think it was I thought there was a lot of tension basically at every point throughout the piece. And one thing I was thinking about in the central metaphor of like cutting back the wisteria being the thing that allows it to blossom and bloom, and then also the wisteria is still a domesticated plant in this case. Like, it's so beautiful, it's been hacked away by her, but it's still domestic, it's still kind of stuck there. And then it's really the interaction that she has with this creature that is kind of full of ambiguity. And it was almost like a violation for both her and the creature when she saw it. And so they did this pretending not to have seen, but then it's in the piece, it's been written about, so we all know about it, it feels like a second violation. And so I think those last lines really bring that tension to the fore, because how can you pretend that you haven't seen, that it hasn't seen you, that this kind of recognition hasn't happened, when you're now telling this whole audience about it. So I think there's something like tricksterish about this voice.
It could be. That's wonderful analysis of it, and I could be like, is she jealous? Is she jealous from the tree? Looks like she is. You know, the way she was describing this tree, personifying the tree too. I do think. I mean, it's interesting because there's so much there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of psychology there. Let's just put it this way. So there's a lot of psychoanalysis in this piece as well, not only just like literature analysis. So I do think there's a lot of layers, right? It's a lot of layers, a lot of deep layers that seem to be, so yeah, but it's very effective.
Yeah, when I first did my first run through, I had that initial kind of, it felt like a setup for kind of a traditional horror story. And of course, if you crossbreed Edgar Allan Poe with sort of the feminine fire, the feminine mystique, you get Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And the yellow wallpaper is all about this idea of the tendrils coming out of the wallpaper that is the thing that is simultaneously her mirror and her shadow. So if you add Virginia Woolf into the mix, you get a whole genre, this whole genre of the, you know, feminine trapped in a self-contained situation where nature might be the wild force that helps kind of pull someone out of a situation like that.
I like the idea of creating that genre. I think that's I wouldn't have never like put that, I would have never quite put that together like that. So that's another illustration why we do these conversations, because yeah, that intersection is pretty cool. I got my own little reveal if you're interested.
Yeah.
Jerica was kind enough to send me her explanation, her behind the scenes of writing this piece, so I could share that with you.
That would be.
Before you tell us, does she reveal what the thing is, the creature? Because
Don't
the
ruin
science
it,
fiction nerd was, I want to know what it is. Is it a snake? Maybe it's a Garden of Eden thing going on.
Right.
But then, of course, you shouldn't know what it is if it's a reflection.
So yeah, I guess we'll save, right, if you want to keep the mystery, like fast forward about a minute and a half. So
Spoiler alert, good to know.
So this is Jerica's words. Some talented gardener planted wisteria along the side of my house before I moved there, and it was years before I understood what it was or how I was meant to care for it. As the wisteria grew, it was supposed to be trained and twisted along the posts and a small fence. In my good-natured negligence, the wisteria grew on its own path, twisting up the railings of the deck, up the crabapple tree branches, in and around itself in wide loops. I now fight a losing battle against trimming it back every season, and I feel as though it has a mind of its own, and a cunning, determined one at that. It's a little bit of trickster quality, maybe. But oh, the flowers are gorgeous. They're delicate waterfalls of purple. The bees and hummingbirds love them, and they're worth the seasonal overgrowth battle. She goes on, I started this piece after a weekend of pruning, when I'd cut back enough to actually change the way the light came through the part of the yard. I've learned to be ruthless with the weeds and cutting back invasives, but it's more difficult to trim plants I like, even if I know it's both necessary and beneficial. There's that kind of tension, right? You don't want to, I kind of felt that at times too, you don't want to cut too much of the thing that you want more of. She continues, it was that strange sort of guilt that came with me when I sat down to write, a worry that I'd taken something from the yard, from the wisteria that I didn't understand and might even be beyond my comprehension. It was easy to imagine the wisteria a creature or home of a creature, one who possibly was going about their life as I was. I love imagery when the speculative sits right in the middle of the ordinary, like a neighbor. And that was the image that pulled the piece together for me. Two neighbors minding their own business. So we don't get too much of a spoiler, but kind of a more of an imaginary creature, just to kind of say,
Yeah.
there's something in there, kind of doing what I'm doing on this side, doing that thing on that side.
As I
Yeah.
think that, as I always say, blame it on the gardener.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
no, yeah, go on.
I was going to say, I kind of professionally, I feel duty bound to read directly from the bio and mention that Jerica is a non-binary, neurodivergent queer cook birder and chicken herder. And I'm retrospectively thinking of all the feminine I was imposing. And that description that you just gave makes me step out of that a little bit to what extent possible and realize there's a lot of potential that I might miss if I deliberately look at the author's gender and then start making assumptions. And that's good. That's a good little wake up. It's a good little, oh, okay. Yeah, I see I was superimposing a whole bunch of data on Jerica's piece because immediately I was thinking either squelched daughter or imprisoned housewife. And that's good to kind of just wake up and like, oh, I was looking down the wrong way.
Yeah, well, I think, right, there's kind of that, I mean, just not to go back to the tension too many times, but yeah, that's the kind of the tension of, the thing you're trying to control versus the thing doing what it's gonna do. So yeah, the Wisteria kind of functions as this, piece of nature encroaching on, this domestic life, this yard, this house, the fence. Which of course it is part of that domestic life, but it's also has its own, not quite its own mind, but it has its own, behavior.
And it must be said, I'm an incurable authorial reader. I can't help it. I know that the author is dead and I shouldn't be, but I can't help but look at an author or any hints the author wants to give you, or you might find out about the author's life and revisit the piece.
Yeah.
And I think in this case, that was kind of a nice little perspective jump for me, little electric jolt.
Yeah, well, in our world, the author's not dead. They're on
Thank goodness.
they're on Instagram. I emailed yesterday. So yeah, I mean, that's part of our process. We kind of go through when possible. Yeah, we do like to bring the author in to have their say, so we don't get too far afield. And when we get carried away, as it happens sometimes with their own interpretation, so get grounded a little bit. So yeah, that was a great piece, Wisteria Witness,